flow.
Welcome to episode 136 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. We are into the home stretch of the NHL regular season. The trade deadline has officially passed, so what you see right now is what you get from the Leafs and from every other team across the board in the NHL. So we are going to give our thoughts and opinions on how the Leafs look now post-trade deadline. We're going to talk about the potential first-round matchup against the Boston Bruins. And then we're going to go around the NHL and look at some of the other moves that were made at the trade deadline with some of the other Canadian teams. We'll probably talk a little bit about Vegas as well, who just seems to make any trade they want, whenever the hell they want, and they just keep getting away with it. So we have a lot to get into, and I promise you want to stay tuned until the very end because this episode is going to be juicy. But before we get into all that, it is officially time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing today, man?
Anthony Bruno is always extremely happy to be here and a little more jacked up than normal because it's a post-trade deadline show. Spent a few days in the province's capital, Toronto, Ontario, last week. Took my nephew to the Hall of Fame and his first game at Scotiabank Arena. He was stoked. It wasn't the greatest game, but his boy Poppy, 34, scored the overtime winner. So what more can you ask for, right? What dreams are made of. So it was fun, man. I'm glad they pulled out the W for him. We were joking. I don't know if we did an on camera, off camera, saying 100% slam dunk the Leafs shutout streak or non-shutout streak was going to come to an end during that game. But we were lucky and we saw a great game, man. Memories to have forever.
Lepore, you forgot to mention that
Yes.
GFP officially reunited in Toronto during your trip
Yes.
to TO.
Yeah, we Bruno and I met up for the first time in a long time, had some good pizza, shout out, and they're not a sponsor of the show. Descendant Pizza in Leslieville. I had heard good things, A+ all the way. I would give a very high score to Descendant Pizza. It was excellent.
Yeah, that was solid. Like usually, when you come to someone else's city, that person should be giving out like the restaurant recommendations, but Lepore literally is like the pizza guru. So I'm just like, all right, Lepore, wherever the hell you want to go, we're gonna go.
Yeah.
So Lepore picked the place and it was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
So good job, Lepore.
People who know me well know I like to eat. I don't know, Bruno, what do you think? I was considering maybe we should discuss GFP 10,000 calorie challenge. What do you think?
I think so, man. Lepore claims that he could eat 10,000 calories in a day. So I want to see him do it on camera. We might have to actually just live stream it.
Why not? Comment down below, everyone, if you think I could plow 10,000 calories in a day, or if it would just be absolute torture, maybe get it through, it would be a struggle. Or comment down below also if you think I could get to 20,000. Let's see it. I want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, I'd love to see the comments. I think Lepore can actually do 10,000. You'd be surprised at how much this guy can eat. But yeah, we might have to actually put this thing on camera.
Yeah,
but that's for another day, maybe another podcast. But we got to get right into this here, Lepore. How do the Leafs look post-trade deadline? Because they didn't really do much. When you compare it to last trade deadline where Kyle Dubas said, fuck it, I'm just going to trade for everybody.
Yeah.
Because maybe he thought he was out the door potentially. I know things went sour at the 11th hour between Dubas and Shanahan and the Leafs, but maybe there was this little belief in the back of Dubas's mind, like, you know what? I might be out of here. Screw this. I'm just going to trade everyone, bring in like 6 new guys and make a run for the cup. And I just felt like it was too much very late in the season, and it was very tough for the Leafs to adjust. Like, they ended up winning a series, which was great, but I think it was also a tough adjustment for the team. Whereas this trade deadline, it was like the complete opposite approach. Brad Treliving, first year on the job, very conservative, picks up Joel Edmundson, Connor Dewar, a defenseman in the NCAA that no one knows about, but apparently he's 6'7" and 220 pounds, which is great. Okay, fantastic. But other than that, the Leafs pretty much stood pat. So what are your thoughts on how the team looks right now? And also your thoughts on the players that they acquired at the deadline?
Yeah. So the Leafs didn't do much, and they've been pretty heavily criticized for it. TSN, Sportsnet, they were tearing them to shreds, saying that the Leafs did not do enough to get better and put themselves in a position to go on a run. And I think we often forget, like, pre-playoff, what actually ends up happening once the playoffs begin. And it's very, very unpredictable. So with the fact that the Leafs didn't do very much, I'm okay with it. I am more than okay with it. And here's why. Number one, I don't think this team did enough during the regular season, or has not done enough yet, to have earned the right to load up. I understand certain teams in certain positions, like say Boston last year, a historic season, load up. Like, you have a very good chance to win it. You might as well try to put a hammer in it and say, okay, we're going to win it. Okay.
Yeah, Bertuzzi, Orlov, Hathaway, they just went into full like fuck you mode last trade deadline.
Yeah. And even as far as the Leafs go, I look back to the COVID year, the Canadian division season, and they were trash for what they gave up for Foligno. I think people forget, man, it was the Canadian division. We would have had to play, we played Montreal, and had we won, we would have played a Winnipeg team that wasn't on the form they're on now. Like, the Leafs were a heavy favorite to come out of that division. So you should be in the conference finals. So go for it. Like, really and truly go for it. But this year's been very up and down, a lot of inconsistency. So I don't think they earned the right to go nuts at the deadline. I really don't. Furthermore, okay, I'm going to point to people and everyone criticizing them for not loading up. These are the same people criticizing the Leafs for not having any prospects, or every draft. Oh, the Leafs have no draft picks. Well, you can't have it both ways. You have to give up one to get the other. Okay. And we've gone this way many times and it hasn't worked. So I'm okay with staying pat. I really am, because I look at our team, and I mean, you can say this for a lot of teams, but I look at our team, and if someone told me, you don't even have to say, okay, the Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup. You can say, okay, the Leafs are going to go on a run. Let's say they're going to win at least 2 rounds. If somebody told me that, the first things that would pop in my mind are Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Riley went bananas, or whether it's Sammy or Joseph Wall stood on their head, or like the stuff you can't predict and can't plan for, they got some luck. I don't think I would have said, if you would have asked me a week or two ago, there's going to be someone they're going to pick up at the deadline that's going to make a huge impact and push the needle. So based on how the season's gone, based on what's happened to us in the past, and based on the type of personnel we have on this team, and I think the makeup of this team, I'm okay with it. And you look at what the D, everyone wanted more D, better D. Morgan Riley is the only, I don't think Morgan Riley is going to get traded, but he's the only lock on the team next year. Everyone's UFA or RFA. So this could be a completely new D next year. So maybe Trev didn't want to hurry and say, you know what, I'll take my time. There's something I really like, and I'll shore it up a bit, and we'll see what I can deal with in the summer when things open up a little bit.
Yeah, the only defenseman who's actually also on the books next season is Jake McCabe. So you're right. It's basically just Riley and McCabe.
I forgot about McCabe, yeah.
I mean, Riley's under contract for like another 6 years. But McCabe has 1 more year at $2 million. And that's a good point, because they can completely remake the D in the offseason. And the Leafs have a ton of D. Like, everyone who wanted them to pick up more depth defensemen, they already have 9 guys. I don't know what else you wanted them to do defensively. And even when it comes to the offensive side of things, I get it. Like, you could make the argument that Austin Matthews might never have as good of a season as he's having right now. Same thing with Mitch Marner. I mean, Mitch Marner's not having his best season, but collectively, Marner, Matthews, and Nylander are all in their primes right now. They're all playing phenomenal hockey. This team has now been around for 8 years. Like, this is year 8 for Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Like, this is the heart of their prime. They should be going on long playoff runs right now. So you could make the argument, you got to try to win right now. Screw the draft picks, screw the prospects. But what I would say to that is, what exactly did you want them to do? Did you want them to make like an Edmonton type of move, picking up Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick?
Exactly.
Like, would that have really moved the needle? Sure. If they picked up Henrique, you get another depth centerman, a guy who's versatile, can also play on the wing, but then you're giving up a little bit more draft capital than the Leafs gave up for the players that they got. Were they going to go after Jake Gensel? I mean, I don't think that was ever a possibility. Even when you look at Tomas Hertl to Vegas, and we'll get into this later in the show, but this dude's under contract at 8 million for what, the next like 7 years. And I know there's some money that's being retained, but that was never going to happen. So when you kind of go down the list of all the players who were available, I don't really know who made that much sense for the Leafs, given their cap situation, given how the roster looks right now. Listen, I do not have great vibes about this team. Pre-trade deadline, post-trade deadline, sure, they are trending in the right direction. But overall, I don't think this team is a legit threat right now to win the Stanley Cup. Now, in saying that, I mean, when you look at their record over the past 22 games, like they have been one of the best teams in the NHL.
I don't know where it stands now, Bruno, but I think besides Florida, they have the best record since January 1, unless it's like changed in the last week or something. But recently, at least, they had the second most points since January 1.
Yes, you want to know the stat? They have the third best record in the league since January 18th. They're 16-6-0 over their last 22 games. And I believe it's only Florida and Carolina that have better records than the Leafs during that span.
That's a quarter of the season. And I mean, it's optimistic to think they're going to finish that strong. But if someone told you in the last 40 games, the Leafs are going to be a top 5 team, okay. I mean, you take it all day.
Yeah, there are still some concerns, like power play wise, they've been fantastic, goal scoring wise, but it's defensively that they're still a little shaky.
The penalty kill, man.
The penalty kill sucks. Bottom third of the league in penalty kill, which is a huge concern heading into the playoffs. And maybe you would say, oh, Connor Dewar, he's gonna save the power play. I mean, that dude's not gonna move the needle too much. I mean, he looked fine in his first game. Same with Joel Edmundson. I don't really think these guys are going to move the needle. I do think Treliving is a huge proponent of like, he wants like big, hard guys to play against. And Edmundson does fit the bill there. I do think that matters in the playoffs. Like you need guys that play hard, are tough to play against, especially on the defensive side of things. I actually think that matters. Like I know Joel Edmundson isn't that good, but you think back to like when the Leafs played the Habs, when the Leafs played Florida, when the Leafs have played Boston in the past. Like, you know what? In the playoffs, like it matters playing against guys that are assholes on the ice and that play hard and don't give you a lot of time and space. Bro, and I think Joel Edmundson helps in that area, despite him not being that good at hockey, honestly.
Speaking of Edmundson, remember all the tire pumping that Ben Sherratt was getting against Toronto?
And he went for a first-round pick.
Yeah, like ridiculous.
Like I think that was that last year or the year before? He was traded for a first-round pick at the deadline. Like just
that sounds right. And then he got that deal in Detroit.
Yeah, just outrageous.
But a guy like similar, like you said about Edmundson, not that good at hockey, but he made an impact in the playoffs because he was fucking annoying and he was being an asshole in a good way. So, sure. I look more deep into it, Bruno. Again, people who wanted things that were really and truly going to move the needle. We weren't going to give away Minton or Easton Cowan. Full stop. We weren't. Easton Cowan. Someone pulled up the list. I don't know if he got a point the other night. He was going for 30 games in a row with a point. I don't know if he got it. I assumed he did based on how he's been playing. Someone pulled up the list of since 2000 how many 30-game point streaks there's been in the OHL. There's been like 6. And then you see the names. It's like Connor McDavid and like Radulov is there. Like most of them were NHL superstars. And I'm not saying that Easton Cowan's going to be an NHL superstar, but I'm not going to trade that for a rental. I'm not going to trade that ceiling for a rental. Again, especially how our season has gone so far. And even trading away our first. That's valuable, man. That's valuable. I will say the only guy I kind of wanted, like I saw who was available. Let's just say there were 2. The 2 guys who I thought would have been really nice for Toronto to add And one was kind of out of nowhere, and I wasn't even sure if he was going to get traded based on him being a captain in Buffalo, was Okposo. I thought
Okay,
Okposo
that's
would,
interesting. I didn't think you were going to say that name.
yeah, like I remember watching during the season. I think I just looked I'm like, oh my God, he's a UFA. That's a nice deadline pickup. But again, being captain, who knows his loyalty, where his head's at, who knows if he was even going to be available. And of course, Florida got him. It was him. And I think a lot of people are on this island. Toffoli. Toffoli
Yeah,
would have been a
Toffoli
nice
would have been a
add.
nice pickup.
Yeah.
But that's
again,
another guy. You would have had to part with a first rounder, right? Like, I don't know if you had to give away like a top prospect for him, but that would have been way more draft capital than they gave up.
yeah.
And Easton Cowan, by the way, his point streak is up to 32 games
There
in the
you
OHL.
go.
Like,
There
he
you
is a complete untouchable to me because he has really developed into what looks like a very good player. Fraser Minton, I'm not as high on, honestly. I think people are just like, he's like the top center in the system, and he's responsible defensively. And he didn't look very good when he started the year with the Leafs, but he's kind of like the only, I don't know, more like complete player that we have among like all of our prospects. So I think that's why people are like, no, we can't get rid of him either. But I'm not as high on him, to be honest with you. But yeah, to me, Cowan, complete untouchable. And really, it's not like I'm against trading a first round pick, but you have to do it in the right spot when it makes sense. And I think this year, it just didn't make a ton of sense. Again, because I just don't feel great about this team. And maybe if you ask Brad Treliving and you inject him with some truth serum, he might say the same thing. Like, you know what? I don't feel great about this team. Like,
Yeah.
they're good, but are they going to get through Boston in round 1, Florida in round 2, who looks like the best team in the NHL, and then what? Carolina or New York, I should say, in the conference final, and then they're going to go beat Edmonton or Colorado in the cup final based on what we've seen over the course of 60 plus games. I don't feel great about it.
That literally thinking in my head now, if they would have to go Boston, Florida, New York / Carolina, and then pick Colorado, Vegas, Dallas, Edmonton in the final, that may be the toughest cup run in the history of the sport if they had to go through that.
It's time for a quick break for a St. Patrick's Day message from Manscaped. Don't just go chasing rainbows. Make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Trim that clover forest you have going on with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This thing is outstanding. It gets the job done better than anything you've ever used down south. So join the millions of men worldwide who trust Manscaped, and you can use our exclusive promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Lepore, Manscaped never disappoints.
Anthony Bruno, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. So for everybody out there, head to the pub, have some green beer, but take care of your balls. You do not want them looking like a leprechaun's beard. Head to manscaped.com. As Bruno said, the promo code is GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
Do the right thing, fellas. I say this all the time. Look good, feel good, and play good with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Use our exclusive code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. So go to manscaped.com and use code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. You will not be disappointed. It's time for an important message from BetterHelp, a sponsor of today's episode. Sometimes in life, we go through difficult times, whether that's personally, whether that's in a relationship, and your mental health cannot be ignored. And a lot of times, you can't tackle these situations by yourself. You need help. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. They make therapy easier and much less intimidating for a lot of people. BetterHelp lets you have therapy sessions as a phone call, video chat, or even messaging, whatever is most comfortable for you. BetterHelp will connect you with one of 30,000 therapists in their network, and in most cases, you'll be connected with a therapist within 48 hours. So go to betterhelp.com/GFP for 10% off your first month of therapy. Lepore, this service is incredible.
It is incredible. Anthony Bruno, mental health is something that's very serious. And be aware, if you're going through a dark time, you do not have to try to beat this thing alone. There are services out there that can provide you with some great help. BetterHelp is number one when it comes to that. As Bruno mentioned, there are different ways you can get in touch with people, different ways you can contact people. It's all up to you. Go to betterhelp.com/GFP.
Join 4 million people who have used BetterHelp to live healthier and happier lives. So go to betterhelp.com/GFP for 10% off your first month of therapy to connect with a therapist and see if BetterHelp is right for you. As of right now, Lepore, like, do you feel like this team is a serious contender? And I know we've kind of talked about this on the last 3 episodes, and sometimes we've changed our minds, but we just saw them lose 2 games to Boston last week. Both 4-1, 4-1. Even we'll get into the whole Leafs Bruins first round series, but I didn't feel great about that. Losing those 2 games to Boston, man.
If you look at it, if you look at how the playoffs are shaping up and how the matchups are shaping up, I think the only team slam dunk that I would say is guaranteed that I would be like, yeah, slam dunk, they're going to win the first round, is Florida, and even Vancouver, depending on who they get, on how that shakes up. Because you look around, we talked about it. Looks like it's going to be Dallas, Colorado, Pacific. Who knows how it's going to work out? Speaking of the Vancouver point, they might get Vegas in the first round.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. Vegas at full strength.
Oh my God. So they might get Vegas. Toronto's going to get Boston, but that means Boston's going to get Toronto. To me, the only one is Florida. That I really think, I'd be shocked if they're out in the first round. And again, not that I would pick certain teams over certain teams that are the favorites or not the favorites, but more so wow, I'm blown away by that result. One thing I will say again, the hockey playoffs, we talked last year. I don't know if it was the beginning of this year or during the season last year when it seemed like it could happen. That's when it probably was. Buffalo and Ottawa were gaining steam at the end of the year. And I think by the end they were within single digits, 6 points of the playoffs. I never really seriously caught up, but they were kind of dangling there. And we both agreed, if one of those teams sneaks in, you don't want a fucking thing to do with them because they're hot. If they got in, they got nothing to lose. They can both skate, whatever, young, that whole ignorance is bliss thing. You do not want to touch them. That's how I feel this year about the Islanders. I think you do not want a thing to do with the Islanders. You get a team that's chugged along to get in, and it sounds hilarious, but the Patrick Waugh factor of how he's just totally going to be a character in the series, and I would bet he's going to get in the kitchens of his opponent. I think Florida versus the Islanders would be a fantastic series.
And as of recording, the Islanders have won 6 in a row.
Exactly.
They are the hottest team in the NHL right now.
Remember when everyone was shitting on Lou Lamoriello for hiring Patrick Waugh and how it started? And now they're the hottest team in the league.
The Islanders are that team that just doesn't go away.
They don't make
they just don't go away, and it doesn't matter if they lose players. They bring in a new coach, they make changes. They just always play the same style, that gritty defensive style, low scoring. And now they've won 6 games in a row, and that's an interesting point. I mean, they could scare someone. Yeah. If they get into a wild card spot, I mean, there's still 20 games to go here, so who knows if they're actually going to make the playoffs. But if they secure one of those wild card spots and they got to go up against one of the division winners, it'd be a tricky little matchup there. One thing I wanted to clarify about Toffoli. So the Jets acquired him for a 2nd and a 3rd round pick and 50% salary retention. So I know I mentioned the Leafs might have had to give up a 1st rounder. I mean, maybe you could have got him for 1 first round pick, but again, you're still giving up more draft capital than some of the moves that they made, and it just looks like they weren't comfortable doing that. And who knows, maybe Toffoli wasn't even on their radar. I do think some extra offense could always help, because this is a team that, despite the narrative surrounding them about they can't defend and their goaltending sucks and this and that, it's been the offense that has let them down. In the last number of playoff runs, their offenses went completely dry. And the same thing happened last year against Florida. Those last 5 games against Florida, and then going back to, I think, game 6 and 7 against Tampa, the Leafs did not score more than 2 goals in either of those 7 games.
Horrible.
So that has been an issue. And if you go back to previous playoff runs, it's been the offense that has dried up. So even though the Leafs, as of recording, are 4th in the league in goals per game, they have the 2nd-ranked power play. Even like their 5-on-5 shooting percentage, they're 12th in the league. Not great, but like this team generates chances. They put the puck in the net, and you just hope it doesn't dry up come playoff time, and you hope that their big boys produce. It's really simple as that. Lepore, we have to get into some of the other teams around the league.
Okay.
And what happened at the trade deadline. What are your thoughts on, we don't have to go through every Canadian team, but did you like what some of the other Canadian teams did, like Edmonton picking up Henrique and Carrick? So more depth up front. Winnipeg obviously getting Tyler Toffoli. Vancouver didn't do a ton, but they picked up Lindholm prior to the deadline. So what are your thoughts? Has your mind changed about any of these Canadian teams? You still think they're kind of in the same spot? What do you think?
Yeah, I think those teams kind of match up with what I said about Toronto. I mean, Edmonton added some depth, but them winning is going to come down to McDavid, Draisaitl, and if Skinner plays well. And if they can get contribution elsewhere, great. But the X factor is going to be the big boys. Winnipeg adding to Foley is nice. Like that's a well-balanced team, and he fits right in there. Like not showing off, not falling behind, but he's consistently good. So I do like that pickup. And I thought Lindholm for Vancouver was a great pickup. It's just funny at the deadline, everyone, we got better. Well, so did a lot of other teams. If you're a team in the Pacific, if you're Edmonton or Vancouver, you can look at what you did and be happy about it, but then you look across to Vegas and you see what they did, and now you're shitting yourself. So I like all the Canadian teams, man. I like how they're made up. They're all made up differently, but I like their chances. I think I saw a bet the other day. I think it pays like plus 300 or plus 320, a Canadian team winning the cup.
You're basically going to have a 1 in 4 chance.
Yeah.
Because you got Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver, 4 out of the 16.
Yeah. So maybe we dabble with that. I think it was minus 350 that an American team wins. I thought that was maybe more enticing.
Yeah, honestly, that's actually there's probably some value there. I'd have to dig into those numbers. There's some value on that bet, even though it's minus 350. But listen, my mind has not changed about any of the Canadian teams. I still think Edmonton is the best Canadian team right now. And sure, you can tell me to look at the standings and show me how well Vancouver's played this year, and the same with Winnipeg and the additions that everybody made. But I think the Edmonton Oilers are the best Canadian team. I just go down their roster. They have the most star talent. They have the most star players. Even in net, like you could tell me, Stuart Skinner isn't great. Look at Vancouver. Like Demko just got injured. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. I'm sure he's going to be fine when the playoffs roll around, but maybe that injury has an effect on him. Maybe he's not. Maybe he comes back and he's not quite the same guy. Hellebuck is Hellebuck, although he's been struggling recently, Connor Hellebuck. His last like 3 or 4 games going through a little bit of a rut right now. He's clearly the best goalie when you look at all the Canadian teams, but I don't feel as great about their top end talent, which I've vocalized numerous times on this podcast. And Edmonton, listen, they've been there and done that recently. Now, they haven't made a cup final, but they've made some pretty solid runs. Could they lose to Vegas if they meet them in the first round? Absolutely. But all things considered, I still have the Oilers at the top of my list of all the Canadian teams. Right now, they're second behind the Panthers in terms of odds to win the Stanley Cup. So the Panthers are the betting favorite to win it all. Oilers are number 2. And then, yeah, with the Leafs, I'm not feeling too great about them. But listen, Lepore, there's some other, should I call this an issue? I mean, to you, it's a big issue because we talked about this before coming on. The Vegas Golden Knights.
Vegas Golden Knights.
You have a lot to say about the moves that they made, and specifically the Tomas Hertl trade, because if you were paying attention on deadline day, it was out of control. Vegas was literally trading for every player in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was just like, holy shit, they got another one and another one. How are they doing this?
Yeah.
Well, Lepore, you have some things that you need to get off your chest about this Tomas Hertl trade to the Golden Knights.
Yeah. People may get rattled by this comment. I think it's kind of out there, but it's happened in pro sports before. It's happened in the NHL. People will remember events where this happened in the NBA, but I truly believe that the National Hockey League should have shut that Tomas Hertl deal down.
Whoa.
And the reason why I feel that way is because Greer did not act in the best interests of his team. Okay. It should never be that one-sided. There's not a single person on the planet who would look at what San Jose now possesses from that deal and say, oh yeah, way to go. No, incredible. And there's other details there too. Here you have this player, and we'll choose rough numbers. He makes about $8 million. Okay. So $8 million for a very good player. Okay. I think people would say Tomas Hertl, he's had some health issues lately, but he's fairly paid. So $8 million, he's a very good player. Okay. So $8 million. San Jose has him signed long term. So you have a player who's fairly paid and paid long term, and you trade him and you retain, I think it was what, like 17% or whatever the weird number was.
17%.
But let's use round numbers. So 8 million, 20%. Now we make 6 million on the Vegas books. Okay. What you got in return was Vegas's first round pick, the kid who was drafted last year, and he was 32nd overall because Vegas won the cup, and their pick this year, which could also be a late first round pick. But then you also included 2/3. How did that even come up? Whenever these deals happen, I always ask myself, okay, well, both teams reach for the moon and then they negotiate down. Well, what did Vegas ask for to start? They wanted that deal without the two, like they wanted more added to it. Like it can't be possible, right? Or if you're San Jose, what did you start with? And then you went all the way back to 2 third-round picks. Furthermore, they play in the same division. And who knows what the landscape of this division will be 3-5 years from now. So they gave up a star player to a division rival, retained on it. He signed until like 2030. Okay. And you got 2 first-round picks, but you gave up 2/3. Call it an average of 2 seconds. I mean, people might say that's not really how it works, but okay. I mean, we're getting 2 first, but we lost 2/3. And to be fair, again, they're going to be late. They're most likely to be late. Well, one for sure is going to be a late first round pick, and the other one very well could be. So I think this deal is an absolute joke. I don't know what Vegas did to pull this off. Wherever they dropped off a briefcase of money and ran away. Like, I have no idea. But the NHL should have shut this deal down. I went on this rant the other day on the way to dinner with a friend of mine who's a Sens fan. And he's like, really? You feel that way? And I said, bro, it'd be like us calling you for Stützle or Kachuk, who are both signed long term, and offering 2 firsts for you guys to retain 20% on that player. Oh, and then you throw in 2/3. Imagine what we'd have to do to get Brady Kachuk on the books in Toronto for $6 million. If they asked for 4 firsts, I'd consider. Legit.
Yeah, for real. They would have wanted first round picks, Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton,
Robertson, whatever. Like, they would have wanted everything. And to be fair, if you're Toronto, if you could get Brady Kachuk on your books for the remainder of his contract at $6 million, do it. Like, I don't know like what the limit would be. And to the point though, had we called them with that trade, they tell us to go fuck ourselves. It wouldn't even be on the table, let alone who knows what we'd give up. Right? So it was a terrible deal. I think it was a terrible look for the National Hockey League because it was so unbelievably one-sided. And I'll admit it, there's some extra bitterness because it was Vegas.
Yeah.
That just seems to do whatever the fuck they want.
It's crazy. They have all this cap space because all of their guys are on LTIR. And listen, it's not like Vegas is in a very strong position right now. It's not like they're leading the division. Like, they're kind of fighting for a playoff spot right now. It's not all sunshine and rainbows in Vegas. Like, there's a chance that they could slip down the standings here. They could potentially miss the playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's just crazy how this team It's like every year they're always in a position to add. It's even like even Tampa, like the year that Kucherov was on LTIR, all the moves that team has made around the trade deadline, leading into the playoffs when they've gone on their cup runs. Like first Vegas gets Anthony Mantha for a second and a fourth round pick. Capitals retain 50%. We're like, okay, they got Mantha, solid player, like 20-goal scorer, power forward. Then they get Noah Hannafin, which was just outrageous.
Yeah.
I was like, you're kidding me. And listen, I never thought he was coming to the Leafs, but it's like, Vegas? This team is already loaded defensively. Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, McNabb, Martinez. Like, go down the list. And now they get Noah Hannafin? Are you kidding me? Now, I understand, like, Alec Martinez, he's on LTIR. Like, Stone is injured. I mean, Jack Eichel's back, but like he was injured. Like they've had a ton of injuries. So I get that they can kind of make these things work. But man, and then to add on top of that, Tomas Hertl. He's still 30 years old. He's been basically a point a game player over the last like 5 or 6 years. He's a good player. Like he's not an elite player, but I think what you said, Lepore, like he's paid fairly for what he does. Now, I'm not going to the extent that you are in saying that the NHL should have shut down the deal, but holy shit, when you look at it, man, it's pretty wild, especially considering that Vegas also got those 2 third-round picks.
Yes.
Like, you got San Jose to retain 17%, and you got 2 third-round picks in return.
I was just thinking, so if we didn't get the 2 third-round picks, we would have had to have retained more. Think of it that way.
It's pretty crazy. And maybe you could say like, oh, San Jose was in kind of a tough spot. Like they're trying to move on and get as much, draft capital and assets as they can. But I feel like they probably could have done a little bit better than this.
Think of it this way, Bruno. Why did San Jose have to make that deal? What was the urgency to get rid of Tomas Hertl? And if Tomas Hertl was available in the offseason, I would think someone would be willing to trade for him, not retained. Somebody would just want him.
Yeah, you could totally make the argument that there's a team that could fit him under the cap. It's not like this guy's making $10-11 million. Like he's being paid pretty fairly for what he brings to the table.
Yeah. So it makes no sense. The deal makes no sense. And I'll stand on the hill, man. The NHL should not have allowed that deal to go through. And why they did, or why I can't imagine. I can't for the life of me think why San Jose would have made that deal. So comment down below, everyone. I mean, like, if I'm missing something, comment down below. Maybe Lepore is just missing some detail of the deal.
Yeah, I think the timing is a little weird. Like, I don't know, maybe San Jose knows something about his injury history that the rest of the league doesn't. I mean, the guy still has to pass a physical in order to, for the deal to go through and all that. But maybe they know, like, this guy's kind of damaged goods at this point, and let's get what we can. Maybe that's a part of this, because I don't see why they couldn't have waited until the offseason to try and make a better deal. Or was there a better deal on the table earlier in the season? Last offseason, even? I would imagine last offseason there was probably an even better deal on the table. So that's what's kind of weird to me, is just the timing. Like, why did they have to do this right now?
Yeah. And he extended what? He extended 2 years ago. I mean, it was that whole thing. Oh, is Hertl going to leave? Is he going to be a UFA? And then he signed. It was like, oh, I mean, he decided to stay in San Jose. Whatever. I mean, a little shocking, but okay. They would have been better off letting him walk than having this on the books for the next who knows how many years.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. In Vegas right now, man, that team at full strength looks scary as hell.
Well, yeah.
Holy cow. Adding Hannafin and Hertl and Mantha. And if they can get healthy for the playoffs, man, oh man. I mean,
they're going to.
Yeah, of course they're going to.
That's
game one of the playoffs. They're all going to be out there. Mark Stone's injury issues are going to be out the window. He's going to be flying around like he's 25 years old. Yeah, that's just what's going to happen. That's what these great teams seem to do. They always find a way to do things that the other teams in the league just aren't doing.
Yeah,
and that's Vegas for you.
Funny how that division's shaking up, man. Vancouver still leads. The Oilers are 10 points back with 3 games in hand. Okay. The Kings are 6 points back of the Oilers, play the same amount of games. So there's a gap there. But then sits Vegas. They've played one more game than LA, but they're sitting on the same amount of points. So as it looks right now, it could very well be Edmonton Vegas in the first round in the 2-3.
Yeah, that's terrifying for Edmonton. That is like the stone worst first round matchup they could have.
That is the worst. Yeah.
The
That is the
only
worst.
saving grace for Edmonton is that it looks like they'd probably have home ice, like
Mm-hmm.
barring a complete collapse down the stretch. Now, listen, Edmonton could potentially still win the Pacific Division.
Yep.
Now, as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, it becomes more and more unlikely because they're 10 points behind Vancouver. They have 3 games in hand, but now that Demko's injured, maybe that opens the door for Edmonton. But man, that there cannot be a worst. Like you could say, like the Leafs getting the Bruins in the first round is pretty terrible, but man,
No, Vegas
Edmonton
is the worst
getting
one.
Vegas.
Vegas is the worst one for full
That
stop.
that is number one on the list based on all the moves they made at the deadline and that the roster they now have on paper. That's terrifying for
Yeah.
Edmonton.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way, Bruno. And we'll get into it. We'll get into it and then we'll go on the rant about like the matchups.
Okay, you want to let's get into Leafs Bruins.
Yeah, let's get into Leafs Bruins.
Let's do it.
So the point I was gonna make was that here you have like the Leafs Bruins series. And yeah, the Bruins are favorites. I mean, they just are. They've beat the Leafs, 6 times in a row? They beat us twice last week. There's the history. We have these demons in our brain. People would say the Bruins are better built for the playoffs, that the experience is there. So the Bruins are the favorite. But I don't hate the matchup. To me, yeah, you're playing a good team in the first round. They haven't been that good lately. And as we pointed out earlier, we've been better than them overall. So is it ideal? No. Is it even good? No. But what team were we really going to get in the East that we thought was like an awesome matchup? No, it wasn't going to happen. I was just going to make the point about the Pacific is that really when you really truly look how it's going to play out, the positioning is going to be so important, right? And getting Vegas is an absolute nightmare, I think, for anyone, because you heard my rant on how how I see the Leafs lining up against the Bruins. Are they favorites? No. Do they have a chance? Yeah, they have a chance. If the Leafs had Vegas in the first round,
I'd be like, good night.
yeah, good night. We're 5 games or something, especially just to start the playoffs. And who knows, later in the playoffs when there's injuries, stuff can happen. This team's got a hot goalie. But to start the playoffs, I'd be at like 80-20 Vegas. And I think maybe I'm even complimenting the Leafs. But the Boston one, they didn't do much either, to be fair. Neither did Florida. So like our division kind of stayed put. I'm okay with it. Whatever, man. If you didn't want it, you're afraid. Bring it on. Let's bring on the Bruins. Don't have a loser mentality. What I mean by that is don't think it's going to be don't think about how shit it's going to be if we lose. Think how amazing it's going to be if we win. And come on, if this Leafs team beats the Boston Bruins after everything they've been through, after everything they'd had to listen to, it'd be awesome. And what a catapult into the second round. And people could say that's our Stanley Cup, and then we get swept by Florida. That could also happen. But
kind of what happened last year.
Yeah, I came across a YouTube video, like on topic but off topic. It was Kipper and Bourne, and it was just like the YouTube was playing, and it came across the episode where they were previewing the Florida Leaf series, and they just finished off with, okay, who wins the series and how many? And Kipper went, I'll give Florida 1 game, Leafs in 5. I'm just like, oh my god.
We were riding high, man. They finally slayed
God.
their first round demons. They beat Tampa. We're like, giddy up. The run has begun. They get the wild card.
They get the
Panthers.
wild card with home. We all looked at our path and thought, if they can get past Tampa, which we were favorites in that series, we had home ice and we had a much better regular season. But still, it's Tampa Bay. But if we do, it was kind of like, well, Boston having like with the best team ever. So we kind of thought, okay, good night there. And then Florida opens up for us. But
yeah,
why?
It was like
why get negative?
The red carpet was laid out. It was the same year that Toronto lost to Montreal in the first round, the year of the Canadian division. The same thing. The red carpet was laid out to the Cup final, and the Leafs shit themselves, as they tend to do in the playoffs. When I look at this matchup, what's crazy to me, first of all, is that Boston is still this good. I don't understand, because when you look at their roster on paper, you think about losing Bergeron, losing Krejci. Like, I was on the record earlier in the season. I thought that they could miss the playoffs, like going back to the preseason. I was like, man, you lose your top two centermen, basically the heart of the franchise, and Patrice Bergeron. Like, this team is not going to be a force to be reckoned with. And now they're just chugging along. They still have the same culture. They still play the same way. They still have the same goaltending. And I think that's where the difference is, because when you look at Boston's roster, their centermen, Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, Morgan Geekie, like, that's where Toronto has the advantage. Are you kidding me? Austin Matthews, John Tavares, or Max Domi? Like, I mean, that's all I got to say, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. Like, Toronto should have the advantage at center ice.
But why can't we beat them?
And why the hell can't we beat this team? And now you could say, well, the Bruins, like, defensively, they play very tight. They're sound. I think it really comes down to the goaltending. Like, when you look at 5-on-5 save percentage, the Bruins this year are second in the league behind Winnipeg, a .933 save percentage at 5-on-5. Like, that team with Swayman and Allmark, those guys are just not letting things go by them. When you look at the Leafs 5-on-5 save percentage, at the time of recording, Toronto 19th in the NHL.
Awesome.
That's the difference right there. I know Samsonov's been playing well. Like, Samsonov's numbers since he returned from his little, like, reset in the minors, he's been good, man. 12-3, .911 save percentage, .237 goals against.
Well, I was going to say 19th in the league, but I'd like to see cut out the first like 20 games. And that's, you can do that for a lot of teams, but just to your point of how it's been much better lately.
Fair. Listen, at this point, I don't know who the hell is going to be the game one starter for the Leafs. Could be Samsonov. It could be Wall. Wall has not looked that great, honestly, since he returned. So, listen, Boston definitely has the edge in net. You could probably say they have the edge on the blue line, but Toronto should be able to do damage offensively. But, man, here is where I am concerned. When I watched those two games last week against Boston, Austin Matthews did not get a lot going offensively. Neither did Mitch Marner. Neither did John Tavares and William Nylander. Like, there just wasn't a lot being generated offensively. And that's where I get scared about the Leafs, because when they face quality opponents, it just seems like the time and space is not there for those top guys. And listen, we watch them pile up points. And it's not like they're just piling up points against shitty teams. Okay, because listen, like, Edmonton gets to do the same thing against San Jose and Anaheim, you know, scoring goals at will against those teams. But when the Leafs play like Florida, Boston, even like Vegas, I know they beat Vegas 7-3 and then they lost 6-2 the next time they played them. But it just seems like the time and space is evaporated. And we've seen it in the playoffs as well. Last year, Matthews against Florida. Didn't matter what he tried to do. Couldn't get anything going offensively. William Nylander was the best offensive player for the Leafs, I'd say, just in the entire playoffs in general. So that's where I get scared, is that Boston just knows the recipe to keep Matthews and Marner to the outside, to limit chances overall, stay out of the penalty box as best they can. And that's the recipe to beat the Leafs in the playoffs. So that's where I'm concerned, Lepore. Like, just looking overall numbers, Leafs this year against Boston, 0-2-2, outscored 10-5 at 5-on-5, and the Leafs have a 4.76 shooting percentage at 5-on-5 against Boston this year. It's pretty terrifying, man. So the Bruins are going to be favorites. They're going to have home ice, and I'm just not going to feel great about that first round matchup, even though I think the Leafs have the advantage down the middle and up front. I feel like they're just going to have a tough time generating offense.
Yeah, I think with the Bruins, just talking about them generally, I try to watch a lot of the Bruins because they're a divisional opponent of the Leafs. And I don't think there's ever, I can't think of a better example in the league now anyway, of how what they do proves that save percentage is a team stat, because teams cannot get inside on them. Like you mentioned, the 5-on-5 numbers, they just keep you at bay. It's all perimeter. Allmark, I mean, what was Allmark in Buffalo?
He was good, but he wasn't this good.
No. Speaking of the goalies, do you buy the stuff that they were potentially shopping?
Yeah, where they had a deal in place to send him to trade him for Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Was that the deal?
I believe that was the rumor that I saw.
I would have liked that.
Allmark for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and apparently he nixed the deal. I could be wrong. Maybe someone could correct us in the comments section, but that was the news that I saw, that it was Allmark for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Allmark shut it down. Yeah, I mean, listen, they have two goalies who could be a starter on pretty much any team in the league.
Yeah, I guess if you can get an asset, that helps you somewhere else, but it's a nice issue to have. That would have been fun as hell.
So now that I'm looking at this tweet from Frank Saravalli, fascinating day for NHL Bruins. Sounds like they had a deal on the table to move Linus Allmark to the LA Kings that didn't end up crossing the finish line. And to add on to that, it appears that Pierre-Luc Dubois was the guy who would have come back the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, they're saying that. Yeah, they're saying here Allmark. It was Allmark who was asked to waive his no trade, and Swayman's negotiating a deal.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Swayman's the goalie of the future there. So, I mean, it makes sense to try and deal Allmark, but now they're going to go into the playoffs with both guys. I mean, they did the same thing last year and they lost in the first round. And things could change. Maybe the Leafs just catch lightning in a bottle. But right now, I don't know, man. I need to wait for the betting lines to come out, but I would not feel great about taking the Leafs to win their first round series.
yeah. I mean, no, why would we?
And then, like, if they get through, Lepore, is there any chance that this team is beating Florida? A Florida team who looks fucking awesome. I mean, like, they, from the second half of last season until now, have been an absolute juggernaut. And I'm not going to feel great at all about that series if the Leafs get through Boston.
Yeah, but to me, it is what it is, and all it takes is a weird win in game one. And now you have a team on their heels. The playoffs, man. I think that this season more than ever, it's unpredictable. Usually, you see, everyone kind of has the same bracket. Like I remember last year, everybody was to the point where it was annoying. Everybody picked Oilers and Bruins. Every show, every podcast, Oilers are going to play the Bruins in the Stanley Cup final. This year, there's options, man. There's options. Like, I don't think it's that easy just to say Vegas and Florida.
No. There's definitely some crazy stuff that could happen. Like, I still think, like, my prediction from I think it was last episode was Oilers, Panthers. Like, I'll stick with that for the time being, but man, oh man, I could see any combination, really.
Yeah.
Maybe except the Leafs in the Cup final.
No chance. No chance.
Lepore, are there any other thoughts you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
I'm intrigued to see the way the rest of the season is going to go because, as you can tell by this episode, like our mood is not that good. I mean, we like our team, we think we have a good team, but we don't really think we have a great team. But that all being said, we pointed to what their record has been as of late. So this last 20 games is going to tell a lot. And as you pointed to, the Bruins pretty well have home ice locked up, but I'd like to see the Leafs fight for it. To be fair, I'd like to see if the Leafs continue on the trajectory that they have and the Bruins on the trajectory they've been on, would the Leafs catch them? And I don't expect that to happen on the side of the Bruins by any means, but come on, let's make it interesting and try to get home ice.
Yeah, I think home ice is still. I mean, it's in play, but it's very unlikely just because the Leafs have 2 games in hand on Boston. They're 9 points behind them. I think they just completely shot themselves in the foot, losing both of those games in regulation last week. Like that was it to me. So I think barring like a miracle, Boston's going to have home ice. We're going to have to go into TD Garden with those fans going insane. I just hope the Leafs finish strong here. Listen, there might be a little complacency down the stretch where, the Leafs just kind of don't have it certain nights. I think the big push these final 20-ish games is going to be Matthews going for 70 goals because right now he's on pace for 69. So he has slightly fallen below his pace. And he's been quiet the last number of games. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest motivating factor is the team just rallying behind Matthews, trying to get him to 70 goals. But other than that, it's just kind of going to be, listen, let's just buckle in, get ready for Boston in round 1, work on the details of our game, and there might not be too much excitement down the stretch.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it.
You mentioned going into Boston and their fans. and I felt this watching the game against Toronto, or I should say I was reminded of it. In my opinion, or I'll ask the question, is there a better goal horn, goal song combination than what the Bruins have?
Yeah, theirs is sick.
It's just so deep and heavy and mean and intimidating. Like it checks all the boxes. Like they score that first goal and you just hear that deep horn and then the goal song and it's over. Like we have nothing. We're toast.
Yeah,
You just
it's
you
so
just get that
elite.
feeling.
It might be the best in the NHL.
Yeah, I think it is. The
Like
Leafs,
Chicago's is pretty good, but
that's
Chicago stinks.
that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Chicago stinks now, but I'm just thinking back to when Taves and Kane and Duncan Keith were winning cups. That was pretty elite.
Yeah. I like what Vancouver did, how Vancouver did Breakfast Club. It's like a dance version of Breakfast Club. I don't hate that. Little different.
Yeah,
little out
theirs
there.
is solid as well. But man, the Leafs, like, man, I am not intimidated by their goal horn and all their goal songs that they have. Like,
What do you mean?
I don't feel great.
You're not intimidated by guys in suits who paid $1,000 for their tickets? Like, yeah.
Like, listen, I was getting sick of
Drinking
Hall and
champagne.
Oates. Like, that was driving me insane.
I
But
liked
now,
it.
but now I'm just like, man, it's got to be better. Someone on their marketing team or on their operations team, game day operations, they got to figure it out.
I have like, 'cause they've been mixing it up lately. I do like how they play Panama Van Halen. That one's okay.
Okay.
Someone made the point on, where was it? I think it was Hockey Illuminati, that guy who is amazing. If you're a Leafs fan and you're on Instagram, follow this guy. And his suggestion was what was it? Motley Crue. Is it "Unbreak My Heart" is the name the name of the song? It's because it's funny and ironic for the Leafs, because
That would be pretty funny, man.
Kickstart My Heart. I'm sorry, Kickstart. I'm a dummy. Kickstart My Heart. It just popped into my head. For everyone who's writing comments, tearing me to shreds for my pop culture knowledge, Motley Crue, Kickstart My Heart.
Yeah, the Leafs don't have an elite team, don't have an elite goal horn, don't have an elite goal song. Yeah,
But man,
I mean,
Bruno, I will say, being at the Leafs game last week, whew, those concessions, there's options.
those
man.
are elite.
Yes.
Those
yes.
are elite.
Elitely priced too. It's like
the only
47
thing the team has
$47
going
for
itself right now.
$47 for popcorn. What?
Oh, it's outrageous.
Yeah.
$200 a pop for tickets. I mean, that's if you're sitting in, like, I don't know, the
Nosebleeds.
Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah, $15 for a beer, $12 for a pizza, $7 for a water bottle. These are not the exact prices, but they're pretty close.
Yeah. I mean, at least we get to brag at the end of the year when the revenue numbers come up and we're number one in the league.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Still the
Yeah.
richest team in hockey. We got that
Yeah.
going for us.
Yeah.
Other than that,
More embarrassing than anything.
we kind of stink.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is going to do it for episode 136 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. If you're a longtime listener or you just listen to us for the first time this week, we would love you so much if you give us a 5-star rating and review on either Apple or Spotify. Like, it works wonders for us if you do this one little thing. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you really enjoyed the content, same thing here. Please consider smashing the like button, subscribing to the channel, of course, leaving a comment down below. And then if you want to know exactly when our videos come out, click that post notification bell and you'll be alerted as soon as we release any new content. So thank you, GFP Nation, to all our loyal followers and any new followers that we get along the way leading into the playoffs. We appreciate you more than you ever know. Anyway, that's going to do it. Episode 136. Leafs got to put some wins together, get Matthews to 70 goals. So we'll be tracking that. But until then, enjoy this week of hockey, and we will chat very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.